invocation as opposed to one return line number column per subroutine. Can you guys kind of see the difference between those two? We can do recursion only because we have one return line number per invocation. If you have one return line number column per subroutine, then the second time you invoke the subroutine, the return line number would have been overwritten, and then the return point would be just the last one that you want to remember, but it cannot remember anything before that. Okay, it's kind of hard to describe it, but it just reminded me, of saying that. Just because you guys mentioned Commodore 64s and all those older computers. We'll get back to it, if we have a chance, because I think this is okay at this point. So what we'll do in this case is we'll change this one to what we call a passing by value parameter. I'm trying to debate whether I should do this first or okay, we'll do this later. Okay, I'm going to keep this file around, but I will introduce a new spreadsheet first, a new program, which is the simplest case of defining using a Byval parameter. Okay, change hit point. So let's just say that this is a subroutine that is inside of a game, and we want to change the hit point of a particular character. And this time, in order to specify how many hit points to change, we use a mechanism called a Byval parameter. We'll call this Byval delta. Delta usually represents change. And we'll just say that, HP, which is the abbreviation of hit point, gets HP plus delta, and define sub. And on the outside, we have HP is still a global variable, so we have to initialize the global variable to a certain number, and then we invoke change HP. And this time we have a parameter called delta. We have to specify the value of that parameter. Let's say it's just -5. So -5 is used to specify delta. That's my entire program. We'll go ahead and trace it and find out what a pass by value parameter is going to do.
Sorry, did you say by value?
Pass by value, or in short, by value. Okay. So now we go to sheet 2. We don't even need a column for comments because there are no conditions to evaluate in this case. We start with line number, and also there's only one global variable HP. Now this is already telling you something about parameters. Parameters are not global variables. Okay? Because the whole idea of talking about local variables and parameters is we want to eventually replace everything, replace all the global variables so that we don't need to use a single global variable in our pseudocode. Okay, so remember that. Why we are going through all this exercise here. The precondition is we don't know anything about HP. On line 6, we initialize HP to 200. And then on line 7, we invoke the subroutine. And this is where things get a little bit interesting. So first of all, we deal with the old boring stuff first. The old boring stuff of invoking a subroutine is we have to remember where to go back to when the subroutine is done. So we have to allocate a new column and call it return line number. In this case, line 7 is the last line of the program. We go back to post after the subroutine is done. That part is easy. Now, what do we do with a Byval parameter? The first thing you want to know about the Byval parameter is it is almost like a local variable. Okay? Look at delta as almost as if it is saying local instead of Byval. Look at it almost as local delta. What do we do with a local variable when the subroutine is invoked? If you just kind of imagine this is not Byval and instead it is local, what do we have to do when you invoke a subroutine like this with a local variable? We have to allocate a column. Okay, very good. And it is the same thing. You have to allocate a column to a Byval parameter. This is the only place where a Byval parameter is different from a local variable. If delta was a local variable, what do I put here?
Question mark.
A question mark, okay? Because the initial value of every local variable is unknown. Now, on the other hand, delta is not a local variable. It is what we call a by-value parameter. A by-value parameter has a known initial value. How do you think we specify the initial value of delta? Just looking at the pseudocode on the left-hand side, the invoke statement is -5, and it comes from the invoke statement. Okay, so let's just kind of stop here for a moment, and let me just kind
How
of.
did you come up with that? Because that says HP minus 5 equals delta. So shouldn't it be 195?
No. We're not there yet. We're not on line 2 yet. We are just about to get to line 2. Okay, let's just go back and look at line 7 again. Line 7, which is a typical invoke statement, has an extra component this time. Okay, the extra component, or you can just see it as -5 goes to delta. It is basically a component inside the subroutine invocation to specify, since delta is a Byval parameter, I can specify its initial value from the invoke statement itself. And that's how delta starts off with a known value of -5. And this is how a local variable and a Byval parameter are different. Are we doing okay so far? A local variable has an unknown initial value. A Byval parameter, on the other hand, has an initial value that is specified by the invoke statement. Yep.
Is that only the fact that the arrow is facing the other way? Is that only when you're having an invoked Byval?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This one is only a notation that we use in this class. By the time you move on to any other programming classes, they don't even specify goes to delta. It is all done by position. If you have multiple parameters, then you have to give it a list of values, and then it is all done by position instead of done by name. But in this class, I make it very kind of not exactly cumbersome, but I make it very explicit of, this value is used to specify that parameter and so on, just to be very clear in this class. Yep.
So Byval always an integer, or can it be an expression like it says?
No, it can be anything. Can be true, can be false, can be a real number, can be, can be anything.
Can be, let's say, HP plus 1.
Yes, can be an expression. Can be any expression. That is exactly what it should be. In other words, this -5 here, look at this -5 as an expression, not a constant. Okay, it can be any expression that gives you an integer in this case. Okay, I'll be okay so far about how column D gets the initial value of -5. Okay. The rest is not really that mysterious because the rest of this program treats delta just like a local variable. We go to line 3. Line 3 says we want to compute the sum of HP and delta. HP has a value of 200, delta has a value of -5, so the hit point gets decremented to 195. We go to line 4. On line 4, we have to look at return line number to know where to go back to. In this case, we have to go back to post. And then we have to deallocate not only the return line number column, but also the quote-unquote local variable column. Because from this perspective, delta behaves just like a local variable. When the subroutine ends, we also deallocate the column of the Byval parameters. Are we doing okay so far? Does everybody see how delta is really kind of like a local variable, with the only exception that it starts with a known value that is specified by the invoke statement itself? Are we doing okay so far? Okay. So with this simple example done, we can go back to our factorial example. So I will simply call this one here Byval because it is one of the simplest programs that I can use to illustrate passing by value. And now we can go back to the other program, which I have closed. Oh, no, I still have it. So I'm going to change this program factorial so that we don't have a local variable x anymore, and instead we have Byval n. Now that changes just a lot of stuff. So we have to delete this row, and we can safely refer these things to n. We get rid of this row here. You can see that the program actually gets simplified. N minus 1 specifies n, and this one, we use n in this case. This n is now gone. Okay, so that's the facelift that I have to do in order to change the factorial program to utilize by value parameters. Did the program get longer and more complicated, or do you think it just got simpler, fewer lines? Okay. First of all, we got rid of one global variable n. We got rid of the local variable x at the same time. Okay. Basically, those two are rolled into the parameter n. Okay. One single parameter is doing both of those things. And well, since we eliminated one more global variable, in this case global variable n, it is good because the objective is to get rid of all of the global variables, and we will at some point. Let's go ahead and trace this program just to see how it changes the trace itself. Yep.
So this one, you still have a line 10.
Well, yeah, that's just because I'm lazy. So even empty lines, get a line number.
I wanted to ask, instead of initializing n to a number, then you just set no number to n.
Well, let's take a look, okay? Because n is no longer a global variable. So if you just look at how I constructed the columns initially, you will start there's a difference already. We have line number, and we only need one column in this case. There's only one global variable. Which one is it? R. Okay, R is the only name that is not specified by Byval or local or something like that. So in this case, we have one single global variable R, and we'll talk about why we have global variable R in this case. Okay. The initial condition is we don't know anything about R, but n is no longer a column that starts to exist as soon as the program executes. Okay, you can see that I do not pre-allocate a column called n because n is now a Byval parameter. We start executing on line 11. First thing we have to do is to remember where we are supposed to go back to. In this case, it is post again. And this time we have a Byval parameter n. So what should I do next? A Byval parameter is just like a local variable. So what should I do next? Allocate a new column, label it n, and what do I put here? 3. Very good. Good job. You guys are definitely getting the idea of how to use a Byval parameter. Then we are done with setting up the columns. We go into the subroutine. We go to line 3. Line 3 is asking n is less than or equal to n. Is false because n is 3